Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I want to talk to you about a area in Chapter 9, and this is the muscular training chapter, muscular training foundations benefits. And I want you to go to page 375, and I want to talk to you about the muscular training variables related to program design. But before I do so, please keep in mind, ACE is trying to take a ton of information and collapse it into a very short section. They are really more focused, and you would have already seen this, obviously, as you've gone through the textbook itself. They're way more interested in assessments than they are on other materials. The material is fine. Some of it may appear to be outdated, and the only reason I even say that is because remember something, when a textbook comes out, and I hear it from students, this is why I'm bringing it up to you. I hear it from students and they'll say something like this. I was reading the textbook and they said A. I went online and I had somebody said B, and it contradicts A from what I read in the textbook. That's not uncommon, folks. It really isn't. Textbooks, especially textbooks like this, once they come out and they're published and they come out, a lot of the information is already outdated. A lot of the information is not outdated, but some of it is because there's new research and exercise science coming out all the time. Some of it validates what we have already assumed or know, and some of it might contradict a little bit with the materials. My answer to that is it's ACE's textbook and it's their test. So if you want to pass their exam, go by their materials, irrespective of what you hear, see, read, watch, listen to out on the platforms like YouTube, obviously, or any of the other platforms. So I'm saying that right up front because, again, I'm answering questions that students ask, and I want to make sure you get this clear. Not everything in the textbook is 100% correct, and we would not expect it to be. And when we're talking about muscular training variables, like we're talking about here, there could be some issues, and I'm going to briefly get into it because it requires a whole lot more in-depth explanation with some of the newer, I say newer, but I'm talking literally within the last 5 years. We've been watching studies come out speaking about training intensity, volume, things like that, that provide a little more precision. It's all good. So remember, go by what they have written in their textbook so you can pass their exam. So, wow, what an intro. Page 375 at the bottom, muscular training variables. I just kind of want to run through this with you and give you an overview so it's easy to understand the material so you can pass the questions on the exam. They're basically relating these different variables, obviously, to program design, which is where basically everything fizzles down to anyway. Ultimately, you've got to have a program designed or a program laid out so you can train your folks. And they're going to tell you with these bullet points: thorough needs assessment, appropriate exercise frequency, consistent with goals, appropriate exercises, exercise order, exercise volume and load. In other words, the sets, reps, and intensity. These are your variables, and rest intervals. Okay, so those are your variables, and what they're going to do now, obviously, is move into their IFT model, page 376, and you're looking over at the muscular training phases. It's a good idea to memorize, just telling you, memorize their IFT model, both from a 30,000-foot view as well as the individual elements, the functional training, movement training, load, speed training. So not going to get into the needs assessment because, again, ACE, and I don't think it's an issue, but they put a lot of emphasis on doing assessments as needed, as necessary, between what you and your client decide is obviously necessary. And so they give you that little bit of needs assessment. By the way, I always, in textbook, if you've got bullet points, a breakdown of bullet points, you may want to read through those because the editor or the publisher has put that in there specifically to condense information. Training frequency, ACE is going to tell you that training frequency, i.e. the number of days you train or the number of times you train a particular body part is inversely related to both training volume and intensity, meaning the higher the intensity, the higher the volume of training, then the fewer training bouts of training you're going to have during the week. In other words, frequency is high. That means your training load and intensity should be moderate or low. That's all they're saying. Less vigorous exercise sessions produce less muscle micro trauma. I'm good with that. Require less time for tissue remodeling and can be performed more frequently. I don't know why they have to say all that, but muscle micro trauma, sure. That's fine. Most clients never train significantly hard enough, quite honestly. And I'm talking intensity. Volume is a completely different issue, but intensity, most clients don't train significantly hard enough with the significant loads to create such significant micro trauma to the muscle that it creates an issue. You'll hurt people if you train them like that, to be honest with you. So novices just should not be training at those very high levels of intensity to begin with. But ACE is telling you they're inversely related. It's a good test question. By the way, more vigorous the exercise, less frequency. More time. You can train 6 days a week. I can do dumbbell curls with the pen and do it for 10 reps. And I can do that. Not only can I do it every day of the week, but I can do it 10 times a day. I can do 20 reps with the weight of my pen, right? 20, put it down. And I can do that every hour on the hour and create zero micro trauma on my biceps. That's kind of the point. That's an extreme. But you get the idea of training frequency. And they're going to, again, they throw a lot of research studies okay, that's fine. But unfortunately, it's a research study from 2008. Days following exercise, presumably due to muscle building processes. It's a 2008 study. I'm never happy with a study from 2008 since we've got studies from 2020 right now, 2021 and 22. But again, you understand the textbook was written and came out, obviously a couple of years ago. So other studies have shown that standard muscular training sessions, 8 exercise, 3 sets of 10, nobody does that, require at least 72 hours for muscular strength to attain or exceed baseline levels. Great study from 2003, but it's a study from 2003. That's why I want you to read this, take it for what it's worth, learn that material, and answer the questions. And then if you are really interested, go on to Google Scholar or one of the other sites, and you can actually read the most recent data and research and information, which is what I highly recommend you do. It would therefore appear that advanced exercisers who perform high volume, high intensity, whatever that means, I don't really know, muscular training workouts should not train the same muscle groups more frequently than every third day. Now, you understand, I want to get past this quickly, but I do want you to keep in mind, please don't read this and then go, talking about every third day. I trained that it. No, go with what they said to answer the questions on the exam, okay? But when you go to work out, just keep doing what you're doing. That's all I'm saying. Making sure that it's science-based as well. For example, they can perform workouts that emphasize pushing movements, chest, shoulders, tries, Mondays and Thursdays. Workouts that focus on pulling movements, back and buys, Tuesdays and Fridays, and squatting, lunging movements with the legs on Wednesdays. And yeah, sure. Okay. But let's move past that. On the other hand, large-scale study on exercise frequency. Now, this is a study from 2016, so a little bit, okay, that's cool. Based on these results, and you can read through that, 2 or 3 weekly muscular training sessions work equally well for new exercisers, and the choice should be a matter of personal preference. Now we're getting a little bit closer to the reality of what we now know, and this is 2024 that I'm doing this video. We do understand quite a bit more now about the volume, the intensity, scenario, and frequency of training, because there's a number of other variables that do come into play. And yes, even with novice lifters. So it's good stuff. Nothing wrong with it per se. You study it, read it, learn it so that you can answer the questions. So training frequency, they're just basically telling you this is what everybody says. At the end of the day, one of the challenges you're going to face is asking, well, how do I train people then? And the IFT model kind of skirts around the issue a little bit. In other words, I know at the end what you want to read is, therefore, based on the studies, this is the recommended training frequency. We can't do that, folks. Everybody's different. We have business models that determine a lot about how we determine training frequency and a couple of other variables, but you're just not going to get that. You're going to be given the guidelines, and that's what you're going to see basically in this area of the chapter. Exercise selection and order. Primary exercises involve multiple muscles from one or more of the larger muscle areas. This is a given. Just, again, read through it, write it, rewrite it. Make sure you understand the basic concept about what they're saying. Larger muscle groups generally require higher levels of energy, and depending on the training frequency and the training models that you've already kind of determined, now you can determine exercise selection and order. Primary exercises that span 2 or more joints, generally performed in a linear fashion, so squats, bench presses. And then accessory exercises involve smaller muscle groups from more isolated areas that span one joint, right? So biceps, triceps, curls, push-ins, things like that. Personal trainers often design programs by grouping specific muscles into a session. There's nothing wrong with any of this information, but what I do want you to get from this part is on page 378, know those two kind of exercises they're talking about. Primary, accessory. Okay, that's important to know. In addition to grouping exercises as primary and accessory, right? So you have those two major areas. Trainers can select from a variety of training methods to enhance muscular hypertrophy, endurance, strength, power. Some of these options then include multi-joint exercises, right? Followed by primary exercises within a targeted area. Another advanced training option can be to first perform accessory exercises, generally single joint exercises, followed by multi-joint exercises. Sure, fine. I got no issues with that. Just depends on the exact exercise you're talking about. This may entail performing single joint rotary exercises, movements around one joint, leg extensions, standing reverse cable fly, biceps curl. And by the way, they give you pictures of this, followed by the multi-joint linear exercises. And there's nothing wrong with doing, what we would call isolation exercises with compound exercises. Sure, multi-joint. I don't have any issues with doing those. It's really just a question of what the actual goal is for that particular client. You could alternate upper, lower extremity exercises within or between training sessions. Again, this concept of this peripheral heart action type of training where you do upper body movements, right to lower body movements, upper body, lower body, you get this increased blood flow, right? And it's called peripheral heart action training. Grouping, pushing and pulling muscles within a session, right? That generally makes the most sense from a business perspective, because I'm not, I'm charging a lot of money for my workouts. I'm not going to train people 6 days a week. I'm going to train them 3 days a week, and I'm going to do a push-pull type of breakdown with them. So pushing muscles Monday, pulling muscles Wednesday, legs on Friday, something like that. So alternating pushing and pulling, performing supersets or compound sets where exercises are done in sequence with little or no rest. Sure, absolutely not an issue with that. Performing muscular training circuits, nothing wrong with that. I don't have any issues with that either. With each exercise addresses a different muscle group. Got no issues with those. Memorize those. Those are the different ways or methods that they're saying you can train people. We already know this. You already do this when you train yourself, more than likely. Just be careful when you're training people. Little sidebar here. This is all good stuff, but be careful when you're training clients. Teach them the exercises. Make sure they learn how to do proper training technique. First, that supersedes everything. That's my opinion. All right, so training volume is next. They're going to spend a little bit more time on the training volume component. During each muscular training session, a certain amount of work is performed, cumulative work completed, the total number of reps completed throughout the entire either muscle group that you're working or the entire workout, total number of reps would be considered your training volume. So repetition volume calculation, you can do a load volume calculation. This, now, I'm not saying I used it very often, but I have used load volume for athletes, particularly if you're working with, say, a powerlifter. There's nothing wrong with trying to calculate the total amount of weight that was pushed or moved during an entire workout. So bench presses with 100 pounds, 5 sets of 10. I did 50 repetitions for that one exercise. 50 repetitions is my volume, right? Uh, five sets of 10 reps with 100 pounds. Now I would simply multiply my 5 times 10s. That's 50 reps. I used 100 pounds on each rep. That's 50. That's 5,000 pounds of load for that workout. I'm not saying I mean, for the average client, I never use that, but it's one way you could calculate training volume. And if you do it, let me know. You type it in the comment box that you use that. Let me know how you guys are doing this. But from a testing perspective, understand what ACE is trying to help you to understand. There's different ways you can calculate training volume, because it's just telling you how much, quote, work you're doing. Now, again, the word work has a very clear scientific explanation. And when we're talking about it here, it's a little bit more or less formulaic than that. And we're just talking about the reps or the multiplied by the load itself. Again, nothing wrong with doing it either way, but it really can create more of a more work than you need to be doing. Training volume provides a reasonably good indication of the energy used in a workout, as there is a correlation between total amount of, with the same exact person, same exact variables, with the same exact workout in the same exact environment. Maybe closer. Yeah. Training volume is typically lower for competitive power lifters who perform fewer exercises, reps, and sets with heavier weight loads, which is one of the reasons why you can create a periodization training sequencing with heavy lifters using load as a comparative variable from workout to workout, week to week, things like that. Table 912, training volume based on goal. Sure, anytime I see ranges of sets, ranges of repetitions, I always get concerned from a business perspective. But understand the material for sure. You got to know table 912 anyway. Whoop, sidebar. You tell your clients, we're doing it for 10 reps. We're doing 12 reps. We're doing 15 reps. And if we can get more, the idea is that from a business perspective, when I'm training people, I don't want to work on, well, maybe we'll do 2 sets. Maybe we'll do, we're going to do between 10 to 20 reps. I used to do that, and I found that clients would ask me to be more precise. No problem. After a while, you train people, you know exactly the weights they're going to use, you know exactly the number of sets that you're going to be doing, and a rep range. And if they can't get 15 reps and they only got 12, not an issue. We can back down the expectations. But I will say this, in the real world, be more precise with your sets. and your rep range. It's not 12 to 15, it's not 10 to 15, it's not 15 to 20 in the real world. We're doing 20 reps today. We're working on getting to 20 reps today. That's how it's going to work. And we're going to do that for 2 sets. That's the real world, folks. Now moving on to okay, so page 380, training intensity. Training intensity is probably the one variable that is the most important, to be honest with you, when all is said and done. Rest intervals, training tempo, those are important, but training intensity is really, really quite important from a results perspective. It really, really is. So some experts define training intensity as the percentage of maximal resistance used in an exercise. They would consider 4 repetitions with 90 pounds to be higher intensity, then 8 repetitions with 80 pounds. Again, when we're dealing with individuals, we start to develop a very precise method for dealing with intensity based on load, based on repetitions, things like that. So there's nothing wrong with this. They do throw the word periodization in here. So when you're reading through it, make sure that you're understanding some key terminology that they talk about. When developing an exercise program for a client who is new, the initial program should feature exercises with a low level of intensity. Yeah, by definition, the intensity is going to be low for a new individual if you're using load as a basis for, or the variable that dictates intensity. So percentage of max, things like that. I'm not going to get into that part of it because that's a whole nother issue and problem when it comes to dealing with novice lifters. So training tempo at the bottom of 380. This is the 4 parts, 4 parts of the repetition. Speed of movement. I say it all the time. Do your movements, especially with novice lifters and ironically enough, with heavy lifting loads, always smooth, controlled, slow negatives. The positives are generally a little faster, but again, it depends on the load. So training tempo is definitely a key consideration and a very important variable with novice and intermediate lifters, and for advanced lifters as they get fatigued. You just don't want to be performing exercise movements quickly. Yeah, but it's lightweight. Well, then the weight's too light. Oh, but I'm working on endurance. What? What do you mean endurance? Are you doing 100 reps? Why are you doing 100? Why are you doing 100 reps for? For muscle endurance. What kind of muscle endurance are you interested in? Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but you can explain it to me further if you'd like. Commonly recommended movement speed is 6 seconds per repetition. Take a deep breath. It's Ace's book. They wrote it. If they ask a question, you answer it with their information. When you step into the real world, of course, that's not correct. It depends on the exercise. So the commonly recommended movement speed of 6 seconds per repetition is consistent with the repetition speed long recommended for weight stack machine training. That is a 2010 study. The concentric muscle action should be performed in 1 to 3 seconds, and the concentric muscle action should be performed in 2 to 4 seconds. Just depends on the exercise, folks. Obviously, a squat, 1 repetition in a squat could take up to 10 seconds. Could take up to 12 seconds, to be honest with you. I don't know anybody that does a squat, or I shouldn't say that. Nobody that I ever trained would do a 2 to 4 second negative on a squat. Oh no, it's 5, 6, 7 seconds easily on the negative with a 1, 2, or 3 second pause in the bottom and then a 1 to 2 second rise. Just depends. But most squats that I've done, or even like a bench press, significantly different. 6 seconds on a dumbbell curl? I don't know, maybe 6 seconds on a. The point is that when they ask you the question, that's your answer. But think about it when you're actually training yourself or you're actually training clients. So I'm not trying to throw this under the bus too much, but you do need to understand that that when they're giving you this information, it's based on some older research. It's not wrong, just depends on the exercise. Rest intervals, critical rest intervals, very important variable. That's talking about the recovery periods between successive exercises or between successive sets. Okay. And so when you're doing dumbbell curls, when you put that weight down, how much rest time are you taking? Right. When you so that's a successive exercise or between successive sets of an exercise. So you did your three sets of dumbbell curls with a 30-second rest in between each set. Now you're going to move over to some other bicep exercise. Well, how much time should you take? Okay, that's what they're talking about. The recommended rest intervals for endurance hypertrophy are outlined in table 912. Go back to 379. That's your basic summary table for rest intervals. Again, nothing necessarily wrong, but it's not the most precise way to deal with this. And you can make modifications. There's lots of really good new information that has come out. If you're going to change and make modifications to any of these variables, it might affect the way the other variables now are being impacted during your training. And so that basically takes you to the end of the chapter. They do components of a muscular training session, warm-up, conditioning, cool down. Yeah, read through it. But again, the whole concept of training variables, two things to keep in mind. Read the information, answer the questions from the exam based on their information. But do yourself a big favor, come into the modern world. It's 2024 at the time of this video. There's a ton of research that validates some of this, right? Nothing necessarily wrong. And there's a lot of data that can give you, some little bit more thought on exactly how you're setting up the programs themselves to maximize your client's time with you during each workout and during the course of the time that they're actually with you. So I am hoping that this video was helpful. Please let us know in the comments section. Type the word understand, for instance, or if you want a little bit more explanation on the particular information that I did go over, you want more on one particular variable than another, sure, let us know. Be more than happy to look into that. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.